What if the person you think you are is just a fraction of who you truly are? What if years of conditioning and surviving in a challenging world have left you clinging to strategies and beliefs that mask your truest nature? I'm Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A show that looks beneath our psychological masks and uncovers our profoundly messy, beautiful, brilliant, tender-hearted selves. Join me as we go in search of the hidden power of our true selves. I'm so glad you're here.
I am so glad you're here, and you know that by now. Welcome. Welcome to Who Do You Think You Are? A podcast dedicated to helping you learn how to have the highest regard for yourself, how to live from a place of genuine self-respect and self-love, and how to make yourself a priority in your own life. Meet me here each week for curated tips and strategies designed to help you drop your psychological masks, connect with your truest essence, and simply live life more easily. Why? Because we know that when we approach life in this way, we naturally and effortlessly and organically, and often without saying a word, have more room, more generosity, and more love for others. And listeners, dear listeners, when have we needed that more? I am so glad you're here. So I want to begin by making an announcement at the top of the hour. I will not be with you live the next 3 weeks. I will be back on June 29th. I'm going to be doing some traveling out of the country. And it's a long shot, but if technology holds up and if I can manage the time difference, I may do something from I'll be in Italy actually, but I'll be in the countryside, so I'm not sure about the internet. But if I can and the planets align, I would love to speak to you from there. In the meantime, I have pre-recorded some very interesting shows that will be on in this little hiatus. Two of which are with someone very close to my heart. She is a dear person. She is an outstanding, gifted healer and psychotherapist. And I have known her for going on 5 decades. She is my life partner, my spouse, Dawn Freed. So Dawn and I recorded a 2-part conversation. I won't call it an interview, though I actually learned a few things about Dawn that I didn't know. Not a few things, maybe 1 or 2 things that I didn't know. Sometimes you have to do a live podcast in order to learn about someone. And we got into a very interesting conversation about how each of us got into this work. People seem to ask us quite often, how we got started. Do we like what we do? The brief answer is no, we don't like what we do. We love what we do. We are passionate about what we do. So we talk about that, but we get into interesting things like how do we handle our own stress when we are working with clients? How do we handle triggers when we are triggered during a conversation with a client right then and there? How do we handle that? What do we do and what goes through our minds when things seem pretty bleak and hopeless with a client, as can sometimes be the case? We talk about the intersection of psychology and spirituality and how each of us brings spirituality to our work. Now we talk about those things and so much more. So tune in. I think next week will be a best of. And if you have a suggestion of an episode that you really liked and you think others would benefit if it's rebroadcasted, please let me know. Just email me at Catherine@catherineduca.com. I'd love to know. I have to say that based on the numbers, and you all know how this goes, it's very much a numbers game in terms of visibility on social media and live shows like this. The show that I did on the mask of I'm fine that seems to have been the most popular broadcast to date. I've been doing this since last November. And that suggests a few things. You know, in that show, I talked about how we wear, many of us wear the mask or the facade of everything is okay. You know, no matter how I feel on the inside, I project this image of I'm fine. And while sometimes that's okay, you know, we all put our best foot forward. Um, it is when we feel compelled to wear that mask. It is when we would no more dream of really letting someone in and letting someone know how we're really doing. Um, that's when issues can occur. So that seems to have been a very popular show. I think a lot of us are walking around with that particular mask. So hopefully that conversation was helpful to you, listeners, to look beneath that mask and tap into and harness and embrace the gifts. Yes, I say the gifts that lie beneath our masks. So that's it. But I'll be back with you live on June 29th for what I think will be another compelling and interesting conversation. But tonight, in light of the fact that we won't be meeting live for the next couple of weeks, I thought that we would do a sort of check in. You know, those of you who've been listening to the show since the beginning, or I guess hopped on at any point, you know by now that the name of the game here is self love. Self love. We talk about all things that have a bearing on improving and enhancing and deepening our personal well being. And we talk about that at the bottom of it all, when we are good to ourselves, not in a small, self absorbed, me kind of way, but in a way where we honor ourselves and we take genuinely good care of ourselves, what happens? Well, we're not frustrated. We're not as frustrated. We're not as resentful. We're not as pent up. And guess what? We just naturally have more patience, more tolerance, more benevolence for the people whose paths we cross. And I think that is really a beautiful win win. So self love just cannot help but radiate outwardly. And that energy cannot help but touch others in a positive way. So this is why we talk about self love on this show. And I'm just glancing over. Let me say hello to those of you who've joined us. Just Judy, good to see you. Welcome. Good luck with those planets and bon voyage. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope they align. Still Bill, welcome. I still have the From Darkness into Light bead you and Dawn gave me. From darkness to light, you still have that. Bill, how long ago? How far back does that go? That is really something. And Claudia, good to see you, Claudia. Thanks for being here. Safe travels. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, a check in. Why are self love check ins important? Well, they're important for a couple of reasons. One, life all over the world, especially in this culture, and especially on the East Coast where I'm from. Many of my listeners are from the East Coast, but of course not limited to this area, but has a way, the fast-paced life, the emphasis on go, 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 accomplish, 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 acquire, 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 AKA the rat race. This kind of living has a way of moving us along, pushing us along, pulling us along. And many of us adapt to this way of living just kind of on autopilot, right? We just go with the flow, and one day merges imperceptibly into the next imperceptibly. Somebody help me with that. into the next day. And I find in my own life and in my work with clients, if we don't stop and deliberately pause and take stock of where we are with ourselves, then we can just get pulled in and one day becomes the other. And then we find ourselves at some time in the future saying, how did I get here? How did I get here? And beyond that, life can feel a little bit like Groundhog Day, can't it? So I think it's very important to consciously and deliberately take stock of where we are. This is something that I happen to do on a daily basis. Um, at this point in my life, I don't think I would know how to get out of bed in the morning if I didn't check in with myself. It's just become an automatic thing that I do. So I open my eyes, I come to consciousness, I immediately express gratitude for the gift of opening my eyes. And oftentimes, though not every time, oftentimes before I check the news feed to see what's happening, I express gratitude for this day, and I do an automatic. Doesn't even have words at this point, but it's an automatic kind of GPS for myself. How am I doing? Am I nervous today about something? Do I have a client appointment that I imagine or expect might be especially challenging? Do I have something in my personal life? Is there something in my relationship? Or is there something somewhere in my life that has my attention? And I note what that is. And I try to organize my thought process around whatever issue that might be. Some days I wake up and I find myself feeling especially vulnerable. And at first, I may not be able to put my finger on it. I might not know why. Why do I feel this way? I just feel, maybe I feel shaky. Maybe I feel anxious. Maybe I feel some sense of dread. Whatever it is, I find that by looking inward and figuring out where I am, I find that I can then go in to myself and ask myself some questions. What is it that I'm perhaps anxious about? And what is it about that situation or that meeting or that interaction that is making me nervous? And when I go in and I probe and I ask myself a couple of pointed questions, I can usually pinpoint what it is, and then I can deal with that more effectively. I can give myself an action plan. I can certainly give myself grace. Sometimes I realize that I have to make a telephone call that I've been putting off. And if I find myself apprehensive, I am able to identify what the apprehension is about. So you get the idea. By asking ourselves, where am I in this moment, in this morning, as I come to consciousness, we'll be in much better position to catch ourselves and redirect our attention back to the present moment. You know, you've heard me say so many times on the program that when we live too much in the past, it's easy to become depressed because the past is where regret lives. It's often where disappointment lives, mistakes. I wish I had, I could have, I should have. Why didn't I? That kind of thing. So living in the past often lends itself to us feeling a bit depressed. Contrast that with living in the future. Living in the future. How does that feel? Well, when we live in the future and we project ahead, we can tend to feel very anxious. Why? Because the future has very few, if any, answers. Did you ever find yourself saying, well, what if that happens? Okay. And then what if the next thing happens? And the next thing and the next what if? We can literally what if ourselves into the stratosphere. And that really doesn't serve us as well as we think it might. You know, we we think we're and to tell you the truth, I do a bit of that, and I have to redirect myself because I think I'm planning and I think I'm rehearsing for something uncomfortable to happen. And I think that if I rehearse it, I can get ahead of it. Well, most of the time that doesn't happen. Most of the time, what happens instead is I generate so many unanswerable questions that I find myself in a bigger unknown than I started. Um, and I try not to do that so much anymore. So when I find myself looking behind me or looking way ahead of myself, I try to redirect and come back to the now. I come back to the now. And I accomplish that in a couple of ways. And as a strategy, I'll pass this along to you. Using our senses are a wonderful way to get grounded in the present. What am I feeling right now? What am I hearing? What am I, tactily, what am I feeling? Okay, how does the air feel on my skin? What am I hearing in the distance or right around me? What am I tasting? Um, you know, so that has a way of anchoring ourselves because when we're in our sensory experience, we are in our body, and our body, being connected to our body, is really a form of self love. Now, with that, there's a caveat to that. Um, those of us who may have experienced trauma in the past and have not yet, let's say, resolved the trauma sufficiently, being in the body can be a scary place to be. So if you notice yourself having that experience where you find it too uncomfortable, maybe even threatening to be in your body, so you have to be all the way up in your head, get some support for that. Get some support for that, because in that case, it is difficult to descend into the body if the body has experienced some things that were very unpleasant or dangerous or painful in the past. Okay, I hope I'm conveying that clearly. With that, I see some other people have joined us. Ginny, welcome. This might be a good practice before bed as well for better sleep. Checking in. Absolutely. Absolutely, Janine. You've heard me say at the end of the show, try to get a good night's sleep. Let your cares and concerns, let them go just until tomorrow morning. Uh, uh, good chance they'll be there in the morning. Nothing to do about them now. So check in. What's worrying me? What's preoccupying me? What is it that I'm having trouble let go of? And that may, in fact, give you a better night's sleep. Thank you. And Ari is joining. Ari, welcome. Ari is saying, hi, Mommy. Okay, I think that's meant for Janine. We have a mother-daughter team here. I love that. I love that. Welcome. Welcome, both of you. Patricia, good to see you. Welcome. There is no fixing the past, but we have a shot at right now and possibly tomorrow. Yes, well, excellent point, Patricia. The nows add up to tomorrow. If we try to skip over them, we can overshoot the runway, can't we? So being in the now and experiencing it for everything it presents to us can really be a gift. And I think we'll get into that more as we have more of a dialogue in the second half of the show. Okay, and just Judy again. We can't fix the past, but we can use lessons from the past to do better in the present. Yes, that's true. That's true. You know what that brings up for me, Judy? That reminds me of all the times, too many to count, where I thought I was confronting something, or something was in my path that was very negative. I'll try to think of a specific example. One escapes me right now, but I remember the feeling that I've had very often of like, oh, this is a negative thing. This is an unwanted thing. I don't want to go to that event. I don't want to necessarily interact with those individuals for whatever reason. I don't want to go to that place. And wouldn't you know it, when I did, the unexpected happened. The unexpected happened. And so, Judy, apropos your point, what I've learned is not to necessarily believe everything I think, because what I think is a projection into the future, and it may or may not be based on past experiences. But I can tell you what is based on past experiences. Sometimes it wasn't so bad. Sometimes it wasn't so bad at all. And beyond that, many times it was really good. It was really good. There was an opportunity in that interaction. I met an interesting person, or, a person with whom I could, I don't know, have a meaningful conversation, or some exchange that I could not have anticipated. And the thing I was scared of and wanting to avoid was actually something that benefited me. So I'm learning to remind myself, Judy, from the past and apply it to the present, that sometimes what has the appearance of negativity isn't negative at all, and in fact is a gift. So this all comes about from being willing to engage with ourselves, from probing, asking questions, being curious about ourselves. And what this really does for us is it deepens and improves our relationship with ourselves. That's what this whole show is about at core, improving our relationship with ourselves. You know, when we wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and we have a concern, maybe we didn't sleep as well as Janine would have us sleep, but something's gnawing at us. Whose voice do we hear at 2 in the morning? It's our own voice, right? Whose voice can't we escape in the middle of the night when all is quiet? It's our own voice. And this speaks to the relationship we have with our own selves, with our inner child, our unhealed child, or maybe the child that is healing quite beautifully, but still needs our time and attention and consideration. And I'll tell you, the world at large, and certainly this culture, does not encourage. And in fact, it is not at all conducive to slowing down and looking within. So to do this kind of work, to deepen our relationship with ourselves, is really, I consider it swimming uphill, or up, against the tide, right? Going against the societal pressures. Go, 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 do, 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 get, you know. What happened to stillness? What happened to savoring? What happened to slowing down and being in the moment and, taking our time organically, being mindful, eating mindfully, speaking mindfully, choosing our words mindfully, doing everything mindfully. Yes, including the dishes, So let's go to 1 or 2 more chats, and we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how we know, how we can gauge our self-love practice, how we know if we're moving the needle, and how we know when we're off. So let me just go back to Claudia. Claudia says, true about dwelling about past events. Live in the present the best way you can and hope the future will be a good one. The future can bring an anxiety, for we don't know what tomorrow will bring. Well, yeah, that's of course true. But we have the invitation to navigate the unknown, which is actually oftentimes just replete with hidden opportunities. But when we are swimming in, I'll call it an ocean of unknown, of unpredictability, it can be destabilizing. So, what do many of us do? We grab on to anything we can, or we steer things, even if it's in a negative direction. We steer things just to have something to hold on to that we know. I know this is going to be bad. I know it's going to be dreadful. I know this person is going to criticize me, or I'm going to go into my supervisor and, she's just going to give it to me. I know it. I know I failed that exam. I just know it. So, I think part of psychological growth and maturity is developing a tolerance, more of a tolerance for the unknown, and being willing. I know this is counterintuitive. I do know. But the more you play with it, the better you get at it, and the more benefits you reap. Like, well, it's possible. Just remind yourself, it's possible that in this ocean of the unknown and uncertainty, I can learn how to swim. I can learn how to float. I can learn how to tread water. I can be, and I can avail myself of something perhaps much greater than the little thing I was clinging to just to feel some kind of certainty. You with me? I think you are. Okay. I want to say hello to Marcy. Marcy, welcome. I think you might be joining me for the very first time. Welcome. You say it's hard to be still when you can't turn your brain off. Well, yeah, it's impossible to be still when you can't turn your brain off. So, what I like to say is, I never try to turn my brain off because it's too difficult. I try to give my brain something else to think about, which is, even though I have anxiety in the moment and I can't stop my thoughts from running, I choose to take a deep breath right now. I choose to be willing to be in this present moment. Even though I'm worried about something that's going to happen tomorrow and my thoughts are racing and I cannot stop them, that's okay. I'm willing to take a deep breath right now. And our nervous systems being what they are, the parasympathetic and sympathetic and all the rest, we can't take a deep breath, which slows us down, and have a racing mind at the same time. Those two things are mutually exclusive. So what we can do, Marcy, is remember to take that deep breath. Okay. We can't say don't do this. If you're nervous, oh gosh, I remember one time I was giving a presentation. This was a long time ago in my career. I don't know how many people were in the audience, probably close to 1,000. I was a young therapist. There were people from all over the country paying good money, and I was paralyzed with fear. I don't know. I just was, oh my God, I'm not going to do a good job. They're going to judge me. And someone said to me, I felt my shoulders, completely tense. I was like a mannequin. And someone said, Kathy, just loosen up. Just loosen up. Ah, that person was very well meaning, but that's really lost on an anxious person. Just lighten up. What are you anxious about? Everything's going to be fine. It's hard to take that in when you're nervous. So you have to give yourself something else to think about. In this moment, I use my senses to get here. I plant my feet firmly on the ground. I feel the floor beneath me. I feel the chair under my tush. I feel the temperature of the room, and I take a deep breath, and I'm here now. Because in this moment now, things are not terrible. In the anticipatory movie that my mind is running, things are terrible. But in this moment, right now, when I look around, things are not that bad, and I can slow myself down. So, Marcy, I hope that helps. Okay. Bill, I used to think that bad events, quote unquote, bad events were going to be the end of the world. They weren't, Bill. And you're still here. Well, you're still Bill, aren't you? You're still here. Yeah, that's what I mean. Thank you for all of these comments. Really, you make this time much more interesting for me, and I hope you feel the same. Let's go to a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about what gets in the way of our self-love practice, those telltale signs that we can notice and use to redirect. Get yourself a beverage, refresh, digest this, and I'll meet you back in a few minutes. You're listening to Catherine Duca on Who Do You Think You Are? Stay with me. And welcome back. If you're just joining me, you are listening to Who Do You Think You Are? I'm your host, psychotherapist, and self-esteem coach, Catherine Duca. And we have been talking about self-love and doing a self-love check-in, um, giving ourselves the opportunity to see where we are with our own self-love practice. And I'm going to run through some telltale signs, maybe not telltale, maybe they're very obvious signs that can indicate to you that you are or aren't quite where you want to be with your self-love practice. So let me talk about this. I think the biggest thing that changes, the biggest thing, the strongest thing, the most significant thing that changes when we start to love ourselves more, respect ourselves more, take care of ourselves more, is we are less reactive to other people. Less reactive. What do I mean by that? Well, we don't fly off the handle. We don't devolve into snarkiness or sarcasm or hostility. We neither react, let me say overreact, outwardly, nor do we do so inwardly. You know, some people look very serene, right? And I mean, there are very serene people, but there are those among us who look serene, but what's happening is their reactivity or overreactivity or let me call hyper reactivity, I think that's a better term, happens on the inside. So this is when we internalize the reaction that we're being very careful does not leak out. So internally, we may be fuming. We may be, gnashing our teeth inwardly, privately, secretively, holding resentments. And when that happens, we've kind of lost, I think we've lost our bearing. I mean, this has happened to me countless times, and it actually still does. But the beauty of doing this work is that as you love yourself more and afford yourself more compassion and afford other people the same, you have less to get worked up about. Because the more you understand yourself and your own masks and your own reactions, you can understand that oftentimes they come from someplace in your past. Someplace in your past. And what happens is you have this interaction in your present day and you transfer, in fact, it's literally called transference. You transfer the problem you had with someone in your past, you transfer that on to people in the world today. You transfer that on or project, that's another term, project that on to the person standing right in front of you. And when we overreact like that, what we're doing is we're making that person pay for whatever we lived through with someone else in the past. That's why it's so important to take a look at the past and look at people who've triggered you. Look at people with whom you've had an uncomfortable past and try to, in understanding that, shrink that down. so that you can be in a better position to evaluate the interaction you're a part of in the now. We make things very loaded for ourselves when we utilize this phenomenon of transference. So back to self-love check-in. Do I get as triggered as I used to? No, not so much. I'm understanding that person is just doing the best they can and I'm doing the best I can. So I'm going to give that person grace. All right? As I give myself grace. That doesn't mean you don't ask questions. That doesn't mean you don't clarify things. That doesn't mean you don't disagree, but it's the way in which we do those things. You know, do we have an edge? Do we have kind of a bite, if you will, to our tone? Sometimes you can hear people in the words that they're saying might be sweet, but there's a bite to it. And, you know it when you know it, and nothing can talk you out of that. So, am I less reactive? Because if you are, that's an indication that your self-love practice is deepening. And that's a good thing. All right. Another one is, blast from the past, of course, but ongoing self-criticism. Tune into the voice in your head. Tune into your own dialogue. Are you name calling? Are you being so impatient with yourself? Self-blame, self-criticism. Are you hurling insults at yourself? I'll tell you, one of the privileges of being a therapist, and you can imagine this, is to be let in to the intimacy of someone's inner dialogue. And when I hear people who are not only curt with themselves or snippy or snarky, but actually cruel to themselves, it's so painful. It's so painful to witness that. And I know if any of you listening heard someone else do that to themselves, you would be pained on their behalf. I know you would. And so to other people, you are the other person. And if you're talking about yourself in critical tones, they're going to be pained for you. So listen to that inner dialogue and try to soften it. It's okay not to know the answer. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay, Now listen, I said to someone the other day, we were having a conversation, corporate attorney, and she was in charge of, transferring, was it several $1 million or maybe a couple of tens of millions of dollars is what it was. What's $1 million these days? I think it was tens of millions. And I mean, this was a big thing. This was a big thing. She made an error and transferred it to the wrong account or whatever it was. I didn't quite, get into the minutia, but because the big thing was she was beating herself up. Now, yes, of course, it's a consequential, error. I mean, who wouldn't feel some kind of way about that? But it's the degree to which we chastise ourselves and demean ourselves. And if we're in self-love, yeah, we're going to get uncomfortable when we make a mistake. But do we have to indict ourselves? Do we have to beat ourselves into the ground? Does that help anything? It doesn't. So as we make mistakes, let's gauge how much of a break we give ourselves. How much latitude do we give ourselves? Okay, mistakes are not fun. Who would disagree? But we make them because we're human, So self-criticism. Chat? Let's see. Okay, that's before. Okay. Claudia says, I think this is interesting. I find playing music and singing along can redirect unpleasant thoughts. That's exactly true, Claudia. And I'm glad you said that. That's where we give our mind something else to do. We don't say stop doing that because we can't. We redirect, recalibrate, like any GPS when we change course. Thank you for that. Okay. Janine says, same for me, Claudia. Music helps so much. Janine, I think you're a dancer, aren't you? Haven't you been guilty of dancing around the house? And, you know, until you kind of forget about what was bothering you? I think you mentioned that once. Dancing, singing. Great. Bill says, I've learned to cut myself and the rest of the world a break. None of us have ever lived this life before. That's right. You know, that's right. Comes to mind, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. I mean, forgive the mistakes. So, busted, Janine. You're busted. You are. Yes. All right, let me continue. So, inner dialogue. Do you criticize yourself? Do you revert into people pleasing, or have you started to kind of dig your way out of that and know that you're entitled to your own values and your own opinions and your own, curiosity, right? When we people please, and this is not to say we don't occasionally put our needs aside for other people. That's the give and take of life. That's reciprocity. That's, mutuality. That's a beautiful thing. But people pleasing is another story. People pleasing is when I have to tailor my remarks, tailor my opinions to thread your needle so that you will like me. Does that sound like self-love? That sounds like self-survival. Absolutely. And many of us had to do that to keep the peace, maybe in childhood, right? We had to go along to get along in our homes, perhaps, or in our schools, otherwise we would get disciplined or punished. So people pleasing is an adaptive response to a feeling a long time ago that we just couldn't be who we are. So we had to put the spin on it. And the longer we do that, the longer we forget who we truly are. So ask yourself, where am I with the people pleasing? Am I lessening that a little bit? Okay, because if you are, your self-love practice is beginning to take hold. All right. Comparanoia. Comparanoia. All right, that's not an original term. I got that from a colleague of mine, Gene Montricelli. He uses the term comparanoia. When we compare ourselves to others, is that self-love? The whole world is on some sort of continuum. There is always going to be someone's who do things better than we do, but there's always, also people who do things worse. I mean, we have to accept that. We have to accept that. If we get overly bogged down in comparing ourselves, we're going to feel great when we feel somewhat superior, and we're going to feel awful when we feel inferior. And, if we feel superior, all's well, as long as that lasts. But if that flips, we're back to the other. And so this teeter-tottering is not a feeling of being grounded. It's not being grounded in our core essence, right? These are impediments to self-love. They are all survival techniques. And so something that I've learned to do, I don't know where I got this from, but I sort of have a split screen in my mind with when it comes to these things. And on one side, I have how my people-pleasing response would be, or how I would compare myself and how that would be. And I contrast that with, what would it be like? I love asking myself that question. What would it be like if I could experiment with daring to be myself, even if it's a bit of an unpopular view? If I dare to be myself, if I dare to say no to you, nicely, I mean, politely, I wish I could, but it doesn't work for me right now. Gee, I'd love to, but some other time. or I have to tell you, I don't have the bandwidth right now, or I wish I could, but I can't give this the attention it really deserves. I'd love to, but I don't want to do a rush job on this. There are lovely ways to decline. And if we dare to say no instantly, we are in our own integrity. You know, something else that occurs to me is that this is kind of a strong word, but people pleasing has an element of manipulation to it. I mean, people pleasers are among the nicest people around. But when I say manipulation, I mean those of us who people please steer the outcome so that the other person will like us. And so, in that sense, it's easygoingness dipped, or I should say it this way, it's manipulation dipped in nicey nice. It's manipulation dipped in a type of chocolate, if you will. So, if you're people pleasing a little bit less as a result of these conversations and any other work that you're doing, congratulations. You're loving yourself more actively. Because the idea is self-love is not a hallmarky thing. It's not a cliche. It's not a bumper sticker. It's not a platitude. The more we can embody self-love, walk this earth like we are a friend, as if we are a friend to our self, we give other people permission to do the same, and things get a little bit lighter. So I just noticed Michelle Vallone has joined us. Welcome, Michelle. I have found that the more I have embraced my no and reduced my people pleasing, my overall circle has shrunk, and I'm okay with that. Oh, well, okay. That's a very interesting point, Michelle. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, there are people who are out there doing the best they can, but they tend to love agreement. And agreement is different than support. Agreement is sometimes different than honesty. So if I'm in an interaction with you and I'm in my integrity and I'm trying to people please less, I'm going to look for my no when my no comes up. And if the other person objects to that, well, first of all, I have to give the other person time to get used to maybe my newfound way of relating, because I would say I've broken them in. Michelle, see if you agree with this. I've broken them in that I'm a yes person and I agree with everything they say. I've broken them in. So now if I change the drill, well, understandably, the other person may not like it, but maybe with a minute's reflection, or maybe with our saying, you know what, I know I used to say yes to everything, but I'm starting to reevaluate that because it doesn't work for me. It depletes me sometimes, and I don't really feel authentic. Sometimes with a little explanation, the other person might say, I never thought of that. Maybe I'll have what you're having. But sometimes they don't. And sometimes the circle shrinks. And sometimes, what we look for in relationships, what we used to value, changes the more we deepen in self-love and the more we expand our consciousness. And that happens. And we have to be okay with it. Again, we're not against anyone. We're not against anyone at all, but we're pro ourselves. Good point, Michelle. Thank you. What else? Neglecting our needs, okay? Neglecting our emotional needs, our physical needs, neglecting our needs for sleep or nutrition. Again, if we're just on autopilot, we can let our lives get away from us. But if we accept the baton of being conscious creators in our lives, conscious co-creators, then we're more well, this may sound like a contradiction. We are better able to steer the destiny of our lives without necessarily being attached to the outcome. Now, that might be a title for a podcast in itself. Um, when we prematurely steer things just so we can feel a sense of security, oh, I've got something in the hand, even if it's negative, that's not very much a self-love practice. But when we are in our values and we honor our own boundaries, we steer the course of our lives, meaning I'm not at the mercy of things. I have more self-control. I'm not controlling anybody or anything outside of myself. I'm controlling, I'm giving myself safe parameters. So that's an important difference, a difference with a distinction, I feel. Marcy, if I said no, people in my life, Marcy, if I said no, people in my life would think hell has frozen over. Okay. And what if they did? Because here's the thing, Marcy, and I say this often to myself. I have to do this or that, or else. I find that tacking on those two words, or else, is very enlightening. Or else what? Or else I'll let them down, or else they won't like me, or else they'll think I'm selfish. Well, where did I learn those things? I mean, they may, because I broke them in like that. But maybe, maybe I learned those lessons that I had to be all things to all people, that I couldn't disappoint, that I had to take care of. And so I just internalized that roadmap, and now I do it all over the place, right? So hell would freeze over. And the question I would ask after that is, and what would that look like if hell froze over? See, when we go the one more question, our inner conversation gets interesting. So, Marcy, that can be rhetorical or that can be real. I mean, we're almost out of time, but I invite you to come back and talk a little more. I'm putting you on the spot, but talk a little more about, because I think that's true for all of us. If I change the way I normally am, the people who count on me to be the way I normally have been might have a reaction. And then where will that leave me? So then what's the alternative? Never to say no, even if you really, really, really want to? See, that then becomes, I think, a bit of a trap, right? So lots to reflect on there. I think I have time for one more difficulty boundary setting. Well, self-sabotage. Self-sabotage. Now, nobody self-sabotages on purpose. Nobody says, you know what, I'm going to get right to the end of my goal and then undo everything I did to get here. Or I'm going to procrastinate or, forget what I'm doing or lose interest as a pattern. Nobody does that intentionally. One of the reasons why we self-sabotage is because we might be afraid of failure, or something I think is even more interesting, we might be afraid of success. What happens if I don't know, accomplish the goal? What happens if I distinguish myself? What happens if I stand out? What will people think? Will people be envious or jealous? Will they think, who do I am? Am I too big for my britches? All the rest. So wherever, and I think I want to end on this note because I don't have another hour, as I often wish I did. Whatever stops us in our tracks, don't just say to yourself, I'm a procrastinator. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. No, ask yourself the one more question. Not so much why do you procrastinate, but the opposite side of the coin. What if I accomplished this goal? How would I feel? And how would the people around me possibly relate to me? Okay, so let's ask the one more question. All right, I'm going to do a whole show on self-sabotage one of these days soon. But I see that I am just on the button, so I have to go. Thank you, all of you in the chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Interesting, compelling questions. Thank you to everyone who is listening and who will be listening. And a 3-week hiatus, but excellent, what I think are excellent, compelling recorded conversations. And I will be back. I will be back on June 29th if I don't do something from Italy, where I will be. So I wish you all self-love. Keep doing this work. Keep taking care of yourselves. Keep knowing that your well-being is the most important thing there is. And the more you clear these blocks, the more you will connect with the all of the all, unlimited resource, unlimited intelligence, unlimited love. And you can look forward to radiating and emanating more of that and feeling better. Dear listeners, wide receivers, I love you all. Take good care. I'll be back in a few weeks. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are on New Thought Media Network. Good night.